All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel, Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. Today is Tuesday, June 4th. It is 9 a.m., and I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'll begin by introducing my fellow board colleagues. Joining me today is Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo. Virtually joining us is Board Member Nicole Morgan. We have here as well Board Member Laurel Firestone and Board Member Sean McGuire. We're also joined by our Executive Director, Eric Oppenheimer, our two Chief Deputies, Jonathan Bishop and Karen Mogus, our Chief Counsel, Michael Lawfer. Our Clerk of the Board is Courtney Tyler, and assisting her today is Margie Argel. As you can see, this is a hybrid meeting with both an in-person and virtual components. If you're joining us virtually, you're either viewing us through our customary live stream at Cal EPA website or the YouTube live feed. But if you intend on commenting on any items on today's agenda, you need to be on the Zoom platform. Excuse me. There are instructions on how to do so at the top of the agenda, but if you're having any challenges getting onto the platform, please do just email the clerk of the board at board.clerk@waterboards.ca.gov, and she can help get you onto the platform. Once you're on the platform, your camera will be off. You'll be on mute until it is your turn to speak on the item you've indicated. For everyone here in the room, good morning. Good to see you all. We're here in Sacramento in the California Environmental Protection Agency building. A few announcements for us here as well. Please do observe the exits. If we happen to have an emergency, we'll calmly file out to Cesar Chavez Plaza and await any further instructions. Also, if you intend on commenting on any item today, there is a QR code and a laptop here at the side of the room in order to sign up. Once you do come up, please do introduce yourself, any affiliation you have. And lastly, here for us in the room as well, please silence any phones so we have an uninterrupted discussion today. We are kicking off this morning with a Superior Accomplishment Award, and so would like to call up Eric Ekdahl in order to present this morning's award.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel, members of the board. We actually have two Sustained Accomplishment Awards today, one for but both in the permitting team, so it's a common theme. The first award I'd like to present to Matt McCarthy. Matt McCarthy is a Senior Environmental Scientist Supervisor in the Division of Water Rights Permitting Section, where he oversees the Coastal Lahontan Permitting Unit. Matt has been with the Division of Water Rights since 2007, and in his supervisory role oversees permitting for much of the Central Valley, the California Central Coast regions, and the Sierra Nevada. We're here today to highlight not only Matt's ongoing work within the division, but to call attention to a specific project that Matt was the lead on, and the outcome of that is particularly worth recognizing, and that's why we're here today. Earlier this year, the division received a note from the San Mateo Resource Conservation District and Trout Unlimited that expressed appreciation for efforts to speed up water rights permits for projects that enhance in-stream flows. In particular, they noted a project called the Backfield Floodplain and Streamflow Enhancement Project on Butano Creek. The project goals were to reconnect floodplain in an actively farmed area and enhance flows to benefit in-stream flows, riparian and terrestrial habitats. The project created 4.2 acres of floodplain and 1 acre of riparian habitat, and with that improved connection allows access to an additional 100 acres of historic floodplain. The project's second objective is to increase flows between June and October in Butano Creek, which required changes to irrigation practices and infrastructure. The changes will be done by shifting summertime diversions to wintertime, accompanied by enhanced off-stream storage. The project is estimated to increase dry season flows by 124% and will directly benefit coho salmon and steelhead in addition to the other plants and animals throughout the project footprint. Water rights permitting does not have a reputation as a fast process. There are legal requirements, due process requirements, and complicated technical and resource questions that the permitting staff must work through before a permit can be even considered complete. And that doesn't even get to the public protest and resolution steps, which sometimes can take years in addition. But here the applicant noted that the permit for this entire project was issued just 58 days after the application was completed. To their knowledge, it was the fastest they had ever heard of a permanent water right being granted. It's also the fastest that I'm aware of. There could be something back in the records that was faster, but it is the fastest that we know of. Achieving a record fast water right permitting action is an accomplishment that could only be met through Matt's hard work and the relationship he builds with all of his permittees, which helps to build a more collaborative and focused action that results in a process that actually moves things forward quickly and efficiently, and is a superior accomplishment all on its own. So please join us in welcoming Matt, or not welcoming, but congratulating Matt. Here. All right. Now let's go on to the second. And I didn't bring my readers with me today, so I'm a little bit. The second Sustained Accomplishment Award today is for the Division of Water Rights Groundwater Recharge Permitting Team. Groundwater recharge or underground storage is something that the board has been engaged on for decades, but the topic has taken on new importance over the last 10 years or so with the passage of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and the experience of 2 generational scale droughts and 2 record precipitation years in the last 10 years as well. The team began working on ways to expedite groundwater recharge as early as 2015, when in the midst of what we thought was the worst drought in half a century, as then Governor Brown issued a series of executive orders directing the team to take advantage of what could be wet weather in the near future. The team focused on providing technical assistance to new legislation that paved the way for a new type of temporary permit, a 5-year permit, which was structured to help provide a more efficient process for those that were pursuing a permanent pathway for a water right as well. At the same time, and since 2015, the team began working with a coalition of attorneys, water managers, and technical staff to identify further ways to streamline groundwater storage with a particular focus on capturing flood flows and other high flow events. The results of that effort were an administrative streamlined pathway which expedites permits for high flow and flood capture projects that agree to certain terms and conditions in advance. The streamlined pathway was released in 2019. Then we come to water year 2023, which was a record wet year for most of the state. There was record snowpack and the reemergence of Tulare Lake. The team was tasked with expediting recharge permits to take advantage of the wet water year, while at the same time protecting water quality and other users. Over the last 2 years, the Groundwater Recharge Unit has approved 19 temporary permits, authorizing over 700,000 acre-feet of groundwater recharge just in the last 18 months. Most of these permits were approved in less than 90 days. The team was also tasked with tracking diversions related to a new executive order that simplified managing flood flows for recharge and ultimately creating an online map and portal where all of this information is posted for the public to review and see. These executive order type diversions resulted in an additional 400,000 acre feet of recharge in 2023. The work was made possible by collaboration with partner agencies, in particular the Department of Water Resources and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, which required the recharge staff to develop strong working relationships with those counterparts and the staff and consultants of applicants as well. The team continues their excellent work and has recently expanded their goal and objectives to include additional outreach events scheduled for later this summer and to further expedite any applications we might get in this upcoming year. Please join me in congratulating the Groundwater Recharge Unit and the program manager, Amanda Montgomery, as well as the OCC attorneys who worked with us on these permits. So I'll call out their names one by one. Amanda Montgomery. Erica Thompson. Greg Brown.
Stop.
Benjamin McCovery. Julian Storelli, who is now at the Department of Water Resources and may be online as well. Congratulations, Julian. And next time you're over, come get your certificate. Shelby Witherby. Michael Conway, who is also joining us online today. Congrats, Mike. And from the Office of Chief Counsel, David Rose. And I don't think we have pictures today, but I will figure out
Yeah,
You want to take a picture?
yeah,
with
we
a
can
cell
use a
phone?
cell phone really quick if that works. All right.
Let's do
Why
Matt
break,
first.
why break
and then-
tradition, Eric? I will just join you in elevating and just thanking everyone for their incredible work. It's been just incredibly rewarding to see these last years, just the growth of the permitting work that's going on, but just the relationships, to your point, Eric, that have been developed. You know, it's heartening to have a county come in, be able to work with us so quickly on such a vital project. And then on the groundwater recharge work at such a critical time, just having prepared, you know, I know it took years to prepare for the moment, but be able to have such a success as we've had these last 2 years are because of all your hard work. So just thank you so much. And here, we'll take a quick photo. Thank you again, Mr. Ekdahl, for elevating their work and for everyone's time this morning to be able to acknowledge and celebrate the folks that actually do all the work here amongst us. So just really appreciate that. All right, that now brings us to our public forum. And I believe we have about 3 public forum commenters. And the first commenter I'll call up is Chris Mathis, be followed by Ray Tahir, and then Derek Eurosec.
So Chair Escobar, we've given Chris Mathis an opportunity to unmute and also to start video, and so far we were not seeing response.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lawfer. Yeah, Mr. Mathis, if you find yourself just away from the computer, come back and would like to still provide your public comment, please do just raise your hand. Next, I'd like to call Derek, or apologies, Ray Tahir, and then be followed by Derek Eurosec.
Good morning, board members. It's always a pleasure addressing you. There is a Brazilian Portuguese saying that goes, "Quando você explicar tão muito, você complicar tão muito." That is, when you explain too much, you complicate too much. So I will keep this brief. I sent the chair and vice chair a PowerPoint presentation not meant for the public, at least at this time, which does the following. Regarding RB4, it identifies the problems associated with not having water quality objectives or standards, including how MPDS permits, municipal and individual, cannot be enforced. This is especially true of RB4's MS4 permit, which compels and illegally coerces the implementation of regional stormwater capture projects through a watershed management program. According to this permit, if a permittee does participate or does not participate in this program, it will be in violation once water quality monitoring detects a WQ bell exceedance in outfall discharges or detects a water quality standard exceedance in the receiving water. As I explained, however, there is a way to fix the problem without causing too much discomfort to impacted parties, but it will require a revision of the MS4 permit. Next, how to preserve the state clean water program funding once the MS4 permit is rid of mandatory implementation of a stormwater capture project. The answer is quite simple. Make participation in such programs truly voluntary instead of being coercive. Lastly, on a more positive, well, not on so much on a positive note, lastly, I and my staff were saddened to learn from Clerk Courtney Tyler of the passing of Janine Townsend. I was impressed by her efficiency as a board's clerk and appreciated how helpful she was to me. Perhaps I shouldn't say this, but I used to grease her with M&Ms. It is obvious that Janine's legacy has been passed on to Clerk Courtney Tyler. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure you're glad I kept this brief.
Thank you, Mr. Tahir. Appreciate your comments this morning and the good acknowledgement of our previous clerk and current clerk. Thank you. Next, I'd like to call up Derek Eurosec.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and members of the board. My name is Derek Eurosec, and I am the chair of the Kern County Sub-Basin Coordination Committee. Today, I'm here to summarize the coordinated progress and collaborative efforts that culminated in the submission of the 2024 amended Kern County Sub-Basin Groundwater Sustainability Plan on Tuesday, May 28th. This amended sub-basin plan represents 11 months of intense collaborative work between the Kern County GSA managers, policy representatives, consultants, and state board staff to address deficiencies identified by the Department of Water Resources in their March 2023 inadequate determination. Throughout the development of this amended sub-basin plan, the sub-basin met monthly with state board staff to discuss our sub-basin-wide revised technical approach to addressing DWR's identified deficiencies and our development schedule for the amended GSP, including developmental milestones, progress made to date on those milestones, and the projected submittal date. The sub-basin is pleased to report that we successfully adhered to the final amended GSP submittal deadline. We presented and communicated to the state board staff throughout the 11-month development and consulting process, accumulation of over 150 sub-basin meetings and more than $1.3 million in technical consulting support. The amended GSP is a completely new plan that will replace previous Kern County sub-basin GSP submittals. Key improvements in this plan will include revised and uniform definitions for the sustainability goals, sustainability management criteria, and undesirable results that were developed using identical data methodologies across all GSAs. Number two, a significantly expanded monitoring network to provide more robust and accurate data on water levels, water quality, and subsidence. Number three, inclusion of the minimum thresholds, the MT exceedance policy, ensuring timely notification and accountability among GSAs for addressing any MT exceedance. This proactive approach prevents undesirable results and supports the sub-basin sustainability goals. And four, a detailed portfolio of projects and management actions with a rigorous analysis to validate that our strategies will effectively address the sub-basin's water budget deficit. Notably, the plan emphasizes demand reduction as the primary means of achieving our goals, contributing to 80% towards deficit mitigation. Given this coordinated level of effort and significant difference between the 2024 amended sub-basin plan and the previous submitted GSPs, the Kern County sub-basin respectfully requests that the board direct the state board staff to evaluate the amended sub-basin plan as the foundation for any report or decision regarding a probationary hearing for the sub-basin in January 2025. In closing, we appreciate the constructive feedback and support from state board staff, which has been instrumental in refining our approach. We are committed to conducting additional outreach this summer and to incorporate further stakeholder feedback to enhance our coordinated plan before its final adoption this fall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eurosec. Appreciate your time in addressing the board and look forward to what I know will be further discussion on the basin, but I appreciate the work and here being before us. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that wraps up public forum, and do appreciate everyone that here addressed the board this morning. That now brings us into regular board business here. And the first item is board consideration of adoption of the May 21st, 22nd board meeting minutes. Looking to fellow colleagues if they have any adjustments and or a motion.
Move adoption of the minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you both. Ms. Tyler, can you please call a roll call vote?
Vice Chair Diadamo,
Aye.
Board Member Firestone,
Aye.
Board Member McGuire,
Aye.
Board Member Morgan,
Aye.
Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. Board meeting minutes are adopted. And so now brings us to item number 2, which is an informational item on our current hydrologic conditions and response. Good to see you this morning, Ms. Bean.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. Jessica Bean with the Division of Water Rights. I'm going to do a very brief hydrologic conditions presentation for you today. So if we could go to our next slide, please. So we're going to touch on our traditional water supply conditions slides, give you an update on the Scott and Shasta River, and then water rights annual reporting update as well. Next slide, please. All right, so again, we're looking at some of our traditional slides here. This is the Northern Sierra precipitation graph. So we're looking at that dark blue line in particular, that's this year. And then the light blue area would be the average that we're used to. So we're at 92% of average for the Northern Sierra. Next slide, please. For the San Joaquin area, we are at about 84% of average. Next slide, please. And then in the Tulare Basin, we're at about 82% of average. Everything's down about 2% since the last time we met. So we're trending very similar. Next slide, please. So this is our snowpack for the regional snowpack graphs and then our statewide. And if you can see here, we're at about 44% of average for this time this year. That's down about 34% since our last meeting. You can take a look at that dark blue line is what we're looking at there, and we are at the end of what we're traditionally seeing. So some of our future slides are probably just going to give some basic information on this, but we may not be looking at the snowpack when there isn't a snowpack to look at pretty soon. So just be for future updates. Next slide, please. And for our current reservoir conditions, we're really looking at about the same as where we were a couple of weeks ago as well. At or above historical averages for most of those, including the select south of Delta reservoirs here, Cachuma, Diamond Valley, and San Luis. Again, we're really trending very, very similar to what we've been seeing. Next slide. Since we are hitting an unusually warm spell right now, thought it was worth showing you the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook from the National Weather Service. Apparently we have a heat dome over the states right now that's trapping in a lot of the heat. So we're seeing some pretty high temperatures, across the Pacific Northwest, but that is coming down into Northern California. So potentially 20 degrees higher than normal in many parts of the state, more towards the north. Coastal areas in Southern California will hopefully stay a little bit on the cooler side. It isn't clear exactly when that's going to trend out, but definitely going to be seeing some hot temperatures over the next week or so. Next slide, please. In terms of Scott and Shasta rivers, we have no curtailments in effect, and you can see the reservoir storage here is again trending very similar to what we've seen before. If we could take the next slide so we can take a look at the actual graphs for the Scott River. Traditional slides here that you've seen before. The red line is the emergency minimum flows for the emergency regulations. The green is the precipitation, and then our blue line there is the flows in the river that we're looking at. So we are still above that for the Scott River. Next slide, please. For the Shasta River, we're getting closer. So you can see there's we're getting pretty close to the red line, but we have not gone into curtailments yet. But we are monitoring very closely, and we'll be letting people know as soon as if and when curtailments go into effect. Next slide, please. In terms of water rights annual reports, you can see we've ticked a little bit in the number of reports received, but not enough to actually move our percentage. So we've kind of stalled out here at about 30% still not reporting. So it's worth taking a close look at that. Our next slide, please. You can see again, this is the breakdown by the volume of water that is on those water rights. So a lot, close to 10,000, between 9 and 10,000 is still in that very low water use range. And then if you go down to the bottom, you can see that over 100,000 that we've been looking at. We've got one additional report there, so we are ticking down on that. But still, again, as we've said before, very concerning. We need to get that information in. It's particularly important, but we are working on that. So that is all I have for today. For you, if there are any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you. Appreciate the update here, and looking to colleagues in case there are any comment or question on the informational item, and seeing none, just thank you. You're off the hook. Really appreciate it, Ms. Bean. Look forward to further update. Thank you. All right, that now brings us to item number 3, another informational item. And I have a quick statement. So let me say welcome to this informational item on the 2024 report of the Statewide Advisory Committee on Cooling Water Intake Structures, also known as the SACWIS. This item will include discussion of the 2024 meeting of the SACWIS and the committee's findings. We'll have a presentation by State Water Board staff and members of SACWIS, followed by a presentation by the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and then public comments. Mr. Dolan, an environmental scientist at the State Water Board, and Ms. Gutierrez, Ms. Tesfaye, and Ms. Cato are representing the SACWIS, and we'll proceed with the first presentation. We'll give everyone a moment to make their way up here. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really appreciated.
Thank you for having us. We're just going to set up really quick. Be right with you.
Thank you.
Apologies, board members. I'm just going to get my laptop set up real quick. Thank you.
Elise, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and I believe we are ready. So, good morning. Glad to be here today and to get to present to you all. Of course, my name is Jonathan Dolan, and I'm an environmental scientist in the Ocean Standards Unit in the Division of Water Quality. And today, I'll be presenting on the 2024 report of the Statewide Advisory Committee on Cooling Water Intake Structures, which we also call the SACWIS. Today, we'll be hearing from representatives of the SACWIS in this presentation. And we'll also be hearing from representatives of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power in a presentation that will follow this one. Next slide, please. Okay, so as a reminder, the SACWIS is an advisory committee that advises the State Water Board on implementation of the water quality control policy on the use of coastal and estuarine waters for power plant cooling, also known as the once-through cooling or the OTC policy, to ensure power plant compliance schedules are consistent with local and statewide grid reliability needs. The SACWIS convenes at least annually to consider a draft SACWIS report which includes the status of OTC power plant compliance and recommendations to ensure power plant grid reliability. The SACWIS convened on March 11th, 2024, and approved the SACWIS report. So the purpose of this informational item is to provide updates from the SACWIS report and the March 11th SACWIS meeting. Next slide, please. Okay, so the final SACWIS report includes details regarding the status of OTC policy compliance and water use, updates on grid resource and infrastructure planning that pertains to OTC power plant planning and capacity replacement, and details on air quality and water quality regulatory considerations and permitting associated with OTC power plants, as well as recommendations from the SACWIS related to the OTC policies implementation. So the final SACWIS report does not recommend any compliance date extensions at this time. However, the SACWIS is closely monitoring capacity procurement and grid reliability status. Next slide, please. Regarding OTC policy compliance, the OTC policy originally applied to 19 power plants located along California's coast. As of today, 12 of these power plants are in full compliance with the OTC policy, and 7 are on track to achieve full compliance with the OTC policy. The facility that most recently attained full compliance with the OTC policy is Redondo Beach Generating Station, which retired by December 31st, 2023. I'll also note that Moss Landing Power Plant is one of the 12 facilities that's in full compliance with the policy. However, they're the only facility that are still using once-through cooling water, as they complied by retrofitting their equipment and now use significantly less once-through cooling than in the past. Next slide. This graph, which is included in the final SACWIS report, shows historic and projected water use for all OTC power plants as a daily average in millions of gallons of once-through cooling used per day. Water usage is on the y-axis and time is on the x-axis. So the blue line that you see on this graph represents design flow rates based on the current compliance schedule and the once-through cooling policy, whereas the green line represents design flow rates that are based on the OTC policy's original 2010 compliance schedule. And the red line represents actual flow data reported by facilities to the US EPA. The red line shows that daily average water use has decreased over time as power plants have come into compliance with the OTC policy. The dashed red line that you're seeing projects flow rates through 2031. And as shown in the figure, the projected fleet water use is still below design flow rates from the policy's current compliance schedule. Next slide. All right, and the final SACWIS report also includes information describing water quality requirements and procedures for the operational power plants that are still using once-through cooling and not in full compliance with the OTC policy, such as water quality related considerations and permitting. Discharges from these power plants are regulated through National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits, or NPDS permits, that are issued by the regional water boards. All are presently operating under valid NPDS permits, though several of these permits will expire prior to their associated facilities' OTC policy compliance date. Applicable regional water boards may consider renewing or administratively extending these permits, subject to applications and complete reports of waste discharge from permittees. And the status of each power plant permit is described in the final SACWIS report. Okay, and we will now be hearing additional details from a California Air Resources Board representative on the status of air quality regulatory requirements. Next slide, please. And now I'll be handing it over to Stephanie Cato from the California Air Resources Board.
Thanks, Jonathan. CARB staff's role as part of the SACWIS and the interagency working group advising the SACWIS involves coordination with the local air districts to identify requirements that need to be met related to permitting, as well as to identify provisions in current rules or rules under development that may have a bearing on OTC operations. This slide and the next one summarize high-level takeaways from the air quality regulatory considerations portion of the SACWIS report. Regarding permitting requirements, the operating facilities currently have valid Title V permits. Huntington Beach recently renewed its permit, and the renewal process is underway for Ormond Beach and Harbor. Alamitos, Scattergood, and Haynes will need to apply for a Title V permit renewal with the South Coast Air District 180 days prior to expiration. Their current permits expire in the January to April 2025 timeframe, so we anticipate they will be applying soon and are in contact with the districts to get updates on status. The OTC units may continue operating in accordance with their permits, including meeting future applicable regulatory requirements. Next slide, please. As was described in the SACWIS report, based on information available through December 2023, the OTC facilities are in compliance with air quality rules. And in terms of rules that could affect the OTC units, South Coast Air District Rules 1135 and 429.2 cover NOx emission best available retrofit control technology standards and provisions related to limiting emissions during startup and shutdown. In consideration of retirement plans, these rules allow limited scope and limited term exemptions through the end of 2029 for OTC units that will retire by their OTC policy compliance dates. However, the exemptions do not apply to cases where the OTC system is removed to comply with the OTC policy, but the existing fossil fuel fire generating unit will continue operating. Future projects at the facilities that would involve modifying existing units or installing new units that emit pollutants will need to go through permit application and evaluation at the respective air districts. This includes meeting new source review rules and any applicable best available control technology and emission offset requirements. And I'll now pass on to my colleague at the Public Utilities Commission.
Thank you. Good morning, board members. My name is Luam Tesfaye, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Energy and Climate Policy at the California Public Utilities Commission. In this role, I serve as the CPUC's representative on the SACWIS. So looking, actually, can we go to, I think, the next slide? Okay, I think I'm going to focus here. A lot of the words on the last slide will be part of my talking points, but I want you to be able to see this graph specifically. So the energy agencies have spent several years monitoring the addition of new resources to the electric grid to support reliability. From 2020 to date, 2024, we have added 18,500 megawatts of nameplate capacity to the grid to meet California's needs. And that's really highlighted on the left side of this graph in those darker colors. Last year, we saw the highest additions of clean energy on record in California, with more than 5,700 megawatts in nameplate new resources in a single year. The majority of these resources have been clean energy, as you can see from this graph, mostly solar and storage built within the California Independent System Operator, or CAISO's jurisdiction. Some of these resources are also pseudo-tied to the CAISO system. These nameplate resources have to be translated into what we call net qualifying capacity to account for how they can specifically support reliability when these resources are most needed. In total, we've observed that the 18,500 megawatts of nameplate resources are able to provide an additional 8,600 megawatts of September net qualifying capacity to the grid between January 2020 and December of 2023. So looking ahead, and that's to the right side of this graph in the lighter colors, we expect an additional 11,000 megawatts of new resources to come online by the fourth quarter of 2027. This is largely in response to this California Public Utilities Commission's procurement orders to load serving entities serving California customers. We expect this will add an average of 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts of new resources each year to support reliability. As I mentioned, based on technology availability and prices, most of these new resources are battery storage projects, solar, or battery storage paired with solar. And they have started to have a huge impact on the grid's operation. And we now have over 7,000 megawatts of utility scale storage operating to provide reliability. When we combine that with some of our behind the meter resources, we're at over 10,000 megawatts of storage on California system. I do also want to note, in response to our August State Water Resources Control Board presentation, there was a request from board members to provide additional details on specific milestones for bringing these resources online. And so I'd like to draw your attention to the draft report in tables 4 through 7, where we've been able to provide those additional details as requested. With that, I'll turn the microphone over to Director Gutierrez from the California Energy Commission.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, and I'm going to cover our first quarter reliability assessment and how that takes into consideration the resources that Director Tesfaye just explained. So we perform multiple analyses on reliability, considering new resources and a bunch of other factors. Both the stack analysis and loss of load expectation analysis showed that the system is reliable under average conditions. The stack analysis modeled risks such as extreme events and delays in resource buildouts, while the LOLE, or loss of load expectation, focused on factors like delays and import sensitivities. In the 5-year horizon, persistent risks include extreme heat events, delays, and coincident fires impacting transmission. Next slide, please. The outlook for 2025 to 2028 is positive, keeping 2280 megawatts of firm capacity online. The extension of Diablo Canyon has contributed to the improved outlook. The improved outlook hinges on a record build-out in 2024 and continued resource development in subsequent years. Any delays will impact this outlook. As I just mentioned, resource build-out delays can change the reliability picture. For example, if we're planning to bring 1,000 megawatts of additional capacity online, a 20% delay means only 800 megawatts shows up, and a 40% delay means only 600 megawatts shows up. Figure 8 on the left illustrates a scenario where a 40% delay combined with a 2022-like heat event could result in a 1,600 megawatt shortfall. The agencies will continue to track resource buildouts and reevaluate strategies as conditions evolve. Next slide, please. In conclusion, while we're making good progress to bring new resources online, our grid remains susceptible to risks such as development delays, extreme risks, and coincident extreme events. SWRCB continues to track procurement, development, and reliability and does not recommend changes to the compliance schedules in the OTC policy at this time. Next slide. At this time, I think we are here to take any questions from the board.
Thank you. I really appreciate this update. This heat wave we're in the middle of certainly brings to mind, again, the stresses that the energy grid certainly are under, and the nexus here, obviously, with the once-through cooling policy. But I appreciate that at this point, there's no request for further extension, but I know that we'll continue to monitor how things are going. Looking to fellow board colleagues, if they have any questions or comments here off the bat, we do have one commenter that we can go to then otherwise. And then seeing none, would like to call up Teresa Chang.
Actually, before we
yes,
go
please.
to commenters, we have a presentation from LADWP.
Oh, okay, apologies. Yeah, sorry to advance this too quickly here. Thank you for that, Ms. Beck.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to LADWP and their presentation here. We'll give a moment for folks to swap out on the panel. Thank you again. Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, a few issues here with the nameplates. Hold on. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Catherine Rubin, Director of Corporate Environmental Affairs from the LADWP. And to my right, I have Glenn Berry, who is our Director of Power System Operations. And to my other right is also Dennis Obiang, who is the Director of Power Planning. So with that, you had asked at the August 15th board meeting, you had asked for us to give you a status update. So we are here to talk a little bit about our grid reliability report, give you an update on that, and also the status of where we're at with our projects. So, Glenn.
Good morning, board members.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. There you go. Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning. As Catherine said, I'm Glenn Berry, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. These first couple slides we'll go over pretty quick. They're mostly a recap of our system and things we've talked about in the past. But quick overview, LA owns and operates 3 coastal plants. It's Haynes, Harbor, and Scattergood. These are all critical to the reliability of the LA's operations. LADWP is a vertically integrated utility, meaning it owns its own distribution, transmission, generation, and in addition, it is its own balancing authority. LADWP has its own transmission completely separate from the California ISO. ISO owns about 80% of the transmission in the state of California, and LA controls about the other 20%, which includes the geographic area in the city of Los Angeles. Next slide, please. All right, we do have a unique grid system based on our location. The once-through cooling plants are critical to maintaining that reliability and provide balance and stability to the entire grid. Our transmission system was established and has evolved around the existence of the once-through cooling plants. As a result, the once-through cooling facilities are located in a cul-de-sac at the end of our system, and they are there to help control flows that get imported into the system. LA lacks the capacity to import sufficient power completely from outside its system to serve western and southern portions of that territory. Next slide. All right, the 2023 grid reliability results showed here that we were approved by the governing board in January of 2024. Also in January 2024, those results were submitted to the State Water Resource Control Board. The 2022 long-term transmission assessment showed key segments of LA's transmission system must be reinforced. And those necessary improvements include the upgrade of the Victorville-Rinaldi 500 kV lines to increase the import capability into the basin, as well as upgrading our Barron Ridge Haskell 230 kV line to increase renewable resources into the system. The summer 2023 transmission reliability assessment showed that every LA basin generating unit, including the once-through cooling units we currently have, are needed for reliability purposes. And the resource adequacy projection shows that even with the current contributions from LA basin generation, resource shortfalls are expected in future years. LA basin generation is critical to provide reliability. It compensates for the variability of the renewable resources without disruption and ensures our compliance with NERC standards. Next slide. All right, this slide here, the first 3 tables show required must-run generation during off-peak months for 3 different transmission upgrades that were performed in Q1 of 2023. I won't go over each one of those, but it does show that we do need generation while we have transmission outages, even in the off-peak seasons. The report also shows that all once-through cooling units are needed for reliability and resiliency in the summer peak load months. And lastly, the once-through cooling compliance schedule is aggressive, and it is set up to be as quick as possible with all units being completed within the current deadline. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dennis Obiang.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Denis Obiang, Director of Power System Planning from Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. As you heard from Catherine, since the August 15, 2023 board meeting, DWP has been requested to provide more detailed milestone update, both annually and semi-annually, with respect to our SCADAGO Unit 1 and 2 OTC transformation, including the remaining units that DWP has in its fleet, namely Haynes Unit 8, Haynes Unit 1 and 2, and Harbor Unit 5. So armed with that request, we decided to develop what we call definitional milestone that describe the various stages that those units will go through to achieve full compliance. Next slide, please. Shown here are the three categories of the definitional milestone. We have pre-construction, construction, and post-construction. In a pre-construction phase, we're going through a planning development, including DWP local governance approval processes, ED4, board approval, and then we have a RFP and design that will be sent out, and then the construction begin, and site preparation, environmental training, and construction. After the construction, we have commissioning of the plant and operating and permitting. These are the definitional milestones that will explain what the schedule look like on the next slide. Here we have all of those units, SCADAGO Unit 1 and 2, Haynes Unit 8, Haynes Unit 1 and 2, and Harbor Unit 5. As I mentioned earlier, we have various stages of the planning process for achieve full compliances. We have SCADAGO 1 and 2 at this present time is proceeding with pre-construction and is on target for reaching construction around 2026, 2027. And then we will have full construction starting around 2027, 2028, and then post-construction where we do commissioning around 2029. Separately, and also following SCADAGO Unit 1 and 2, we have Haynes Unit 8, Haynes Unit 1 and 2, and Harbor Unit 5. They're also going through the same process. All of these units are on schedule for a construction phase in 2026, 2027. And then we will have post-construction commissioning around 2029. At this present time, we don't see any change in the schedule. DWP is very focused on ensuring that we meet those various timelines in time, and hence the reason why we will continue to come to the board and give you an update where we are. I will now pass it on to Catherine.
Thank you, Dennis. So to go on and give a little bit more information about our progress update, starting with SCADAGO generating station units 1 and 2. We've already had our notice of preparation had been released. We had a public meeting and it was eerily quiet. We got one commenter and we also received one comment letter. So with that, we have proceeded on. We expect to have the draft EIR out by the end of summer, probably somewhere between July and August of this year. And then we're hoping to go to our board for adoption of that EIR by no later than the second quarter of 2025. With our air permitting, it is in process. We've completed the first part of our application at the end of April. We're now on the second part, and we expect to be submitting no later than the end of July, early August. So then South Coast AQMD will at that point review it, tell us if the application is complete, and then it'll be sent to the EPA, and then it'll also be sent out for public comment for a 30-day public comment period. So we expect that to happen probably in the first or second quarter of next year. The water permitting is in process with the Hyperion, and we expect to have that complete by the end of this year. So that's SCADAGO units 1 and 2. So our environmental permitting is well underway and on schedule. And then I believe that the RFP can start somewhere in, I think it's 25, 26 in that fiscal year. For the Haynes Unit 8, our EIR has been completed and approved. The air permitting is complete and the project is in process. We are also having recycled lines built to and from the Haynes Generating Station. And that is going to be complete by no later than 26-27 and will be online. For Haynes Units 1 and 2, we're in the planning process with our Power System Planning Department. And we will have more information for you at the next, at our next meeting next year and also at the SACWIS meeting. And the same thing with the Harbor Unit 5. We're in our planning process of exactly what it's going to look like. And we will have more information by the end of this year. Next slide. Also, if you recall, at the August 15th meeting, we talked about the voluntary environmental benefits for the extension. And we are taking that package. We worked on the MOU with the Coastal Conservancy. We have finalized it, and that will be going to our board in July. And the MOU will fund the complete $15 million since we did get the full 5-year extension. We will be, but we'll pay out $3 million per year for the next 5 years to the Coastal Conservancy, who will manage the funds for the local coastal projects within a 40-mile radius of the Scattergood Generating Station. So with that, if you have any questions.
Thank you. Really appreciate this update. It's helpful here again as we look at the compliance dates and are able to get updates just to understand kind of where we are within the process. And sounds now at this point that everything's on schedule, but we still have some years out, and I know how construction can go. So just appreciate this ability and moment to be able to touch base on the status. Looking to fellow board colleagues again to see if there's any questions here for LADWP now. Okay, seeing none. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Now, again, we have one commenter here, and I believe we're prepared to go to them. So we can go to Teresa Cheng.
Hi, good morning. My name is Teresa Cheng. I'm calling on behalf of the Regenerate California campaign, which is a partnership of the Sierra Club and California Environmental Justice Alliance. And as you may remember, our coalition mobilized dozens of frontline community members to the Water Board last summer to oppose the extension of the 3 OTC plants, including Ormond Beach and Oxnard. Last week, we and about 50 other EJ and climate organizations sent a letter to energy agencies and the governor's office highlighting a new CAISO analysis that projects we will have an energy surplus this summer to the tune of 2,500 megawatts, based on a 1 in 10 loss of load analysis due to the influx of new batteries and other clean energy resources the PUC just presented on coming online. And I want to note that this surplus does not take into account the capacity that would be provided by these 3 OTC plants, 2 of which are located in EJ communities. So we really take this as welcome news that we can and must redirect the $1.2 billion allocated to keep these old polluting power plants online, instead to clean resources and EJ priorities, especially in light of the significant proposed cuts to climate and EJ programs in the state budget. And I do want to note, as noted in the presentation, while this analysis doesn't account for extremes like wildfires and procurement delays, last summer we asserted that these old plants will take days to fire up and will not help us during emergencies like wildfires, but instead continue to harm the health of the most overburdened communities on the hottest days compared to clean demand-side resources distributed across the state that take minutes to call on. So recent analyses show us that we don't need these plants, and we're calling on energy and water agencies to urge our state leaders to terminate these inflated contracts that will pay for idle OTC power plants that we simply don't need during our budget crisis. And then lastly, I just wanted to note that we're looking forward to continued engagement with DWP and its resource planning advisory group, and continue to push the department to explore alternatives to hydrogen combustion at its OTC plants while ensuring grid reliability, which is also required by the LA City Council. I do also want to note that we and other stakeholders who submitted comments on the draft PEIS on Scattergood never got information about the public meeting that was referenced regarding the Scattergood retrofit, and really hoping that you can follow up with us, Catherine, to make sure that we and our EJ allies who have submitted comments are on the appropriate outreach lists. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cheng. I appreciate those comments and for engaging here in the informational item and the continued work. Thank you. Looking to fellow board colleagues if any last minute thought or any questions that have come up. And if not, this is an informational item, so no need for board action. And we can close out the informational item. Again, appreciate everyone's participation in the discussion here. That now brings us to item number 4, which is annual climate update on our climate resolution and consideration of a process to initiate a new resolution. Give a moment for folks here to transfer over. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and members. I'm James Knockbauer, the Director of the Office of Research, Planning and Performance. I'm joined here today by my colleague, Dr. Hyun, who will be walking you through our proposal for an updated climate resolution.
Good morning, members of the board. Again, I'm Chris Hyun, climate lead at the State Water Board. We'll present today in 3 sections. Next slide, please. First is an overview of climate change and water. Second, we'll quickly share a review of the State Water Board resolution from 2017. And finally, we'll share our planned next steps to develop a new climate resolution, after which we'll appreciate feedback from the board members. So next slide, please. So that we're all on the same page about climate change, we'll start with the overview. This graph is from the latest report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, showing global temperatures rising due to climate change. Next slide. This leads to stressors like changing hydrologic patterns and sea level rise, which lead to hazards like extreme heat, wildfire, drought, and flooding, which impact health, infrastructure, and ecosystems. Next slide. Hazards also include weather whiplash. As greenhouse gas emissions increase, rapid transitions between very dry and very wet also increase over the course of the century. California has had a taste of weather whiplash over the past several years. Next slide. Furthermore, over the next 20 years, California could lose 10% of its water supplies. The Department of Water Resources estimated this by considering increased temperatures and decreased runoff due to a thirstier atmosphere, plants, and soils. Next slide. And importantly, the US EPA has also highlighted inequity of climate impacts in the United States. Minorities have disproportionately higher risks to children's asthma due to air pollution, death due to extreme temperatures, lost labor hours also due to extreme temperatures, and traffic delays from high tides. Next slide. So what can we do about these climate impacts? California has several strategies to address climate change. These strategies address the causes of climate change through mitigation by reducing greenhouse gas emission. And California strategies also address the impacts of climate change through adaptation. Several actions address both by lowering greenhouse gas emissions while addressing impacts at the same time. Next slide. The key plan to address the cause of climate change in California is the Scoping Plan, which aims to mitigate climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions across the state. The Scoping Plan was updated in 2022 and is the basis for some of our state budgets and regulations. Next slide. There are also several state strategies that address climate adaptation, including the Water Resilience Portfolio and the Water Supply Strategy. Next slide. Regional water boards have also adopted their own climate resolutions and plans. Next slide. At the State Water Board, we adopted climate resolutions in 2007 and 2017. We also adopted the Racial Equity Resolution in 2021, which explicitly expands the implementation of the climate resolution to include effects on Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. The Racial Equity Action Plan also includes climate commitments. Our focus today is State Water Board Resolution 2017-12, which is our most recent climate resolution. Next slide. This climate resolution was adopted in March 2017 and includes 30 action commitments. In March of this year, the State Water Board climate team in the Office of Research Planning and Performance conducted a preliminary review of the climate resolution, gathering feedback from State Water Board Division and Office Deputy Directors and Directors. And we found that while some actions were not done or considered out of date, most of the actions have been taken. Next slide. We're happy to share today some accomplishments from the 2017 resolution. This slide shows a selection of key accomplishments, of which I'll highlight several. Next slide. First, the 2017 resolution called for the State Water Board to provide technical and financial assistance to protect drinking water systems in the face of climate change. We see this accomplished through our Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience Program, or SAFER, and through the Drinking Water Needs Assessment. Since 2019, SAFER has provided technical assistance to 300 projects and $700 million in funds to small disadvantaged communities for drinking water. SAFER also monitors water supply systems, considering drinking water quality and drought risk, as seen in the map on the right. Next slide. The resolution also called for the board to summarize the annual volume of recycled water, which we have accomplished. The bottom figure shows the volume of recycled water reported since 2019, and the right is an interactive map of the volumetric report of wastewater and recycled water. Next slide. The 2017 climate resolution called us to consider the need to modify permits and other regulatory requirements. And now all regional water boards have included climate change consideration in either resolutions, planning, or permitting. One of the latest examples being a proposed basin plan amendment by the San Francisco Bay region. Next slide. Another accomplishment from the resolution is the staff report released in 2021 that includes recommendations to incorporate climate change analysis into permitting new water rights. Next slide. And finally, yes, to round out the accomplishments in this is this commitment to identify actions for permitting projects to develop new and underutilized water resources. This has been realized through the California's Water Supply Strategy released in 2022. The water boards continue to take action to support the development of new and underutilized water resources, some of which are listed on the slide. Next. So those are some of the accomplishments of the 2017 resolution, but there were also some lessons learned during the review earlier this year. First, we saw that the 2017 climate resolution was laid out like an action plan, with most actions complete or in process and many considered outdated. During the review, we saw a need for longer-term guidance for climate action, not just a revision of the plan from 2017, but developing new clear guideposts. These guideposts can take the form of principles and processes that would allow all water board programs to consider how to address climate change under a shared framework. These lessons learned provide an opportunity to develop a new State Water Board climate resolution that would be developed with our divisions and offices with input from regional water boards and co-produced with interested parties through public engagement. Next slide. So staff is planning to develop a new resolution that may include 4 types of content. First is a purpose statement to provide overall guidance to the water boards on climate change. Second are principles, which provide guideposts to staff. For example, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research uses resilience principles such as prioritize natural and green infrastructure, prioritize actions that promote equity and protect the most vulnerable, prioritize actions that build resilience to climate impacts while simultaneously reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and avoid maladaptation. The third type of content in a new resolution would be process directions. For example, how should we track actions? How should we align actions across strategies such as the Racial Equity Action Plan and Work Plan? And how should we develop new actions? Finally, new or revised actions could be considered for the new resolution as well, especially those that are not covered by other strategies. For example, we could develop an annual climate priorities plan. Next slide. So why focus on purpose, principles, and processes in a new climate resolution? First, specific actions are important, but they can quickly become outdated, and after time, it can become unclear why certain actions were chosen. Second, purpose and principles provide long-term guidance to staff. They provide direction and scope as leadership changes and climate science evolves. Principles help staff prioritize climate needs and solutions. Also, principles apply to all programs, not just ones mentioned for specific action. Lastly, process. Processes ensure we are going in the right direction. They identify resources and management to track and follow that direction and help us assess if we need to revise our commitments. Now I hand it over to Office Director James Nachbauer to share that about next steps.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So our approach we're planning here is to take a participatory approach to develop this new resolution, following as a lesson, as a model, the process used for the Water Board's racial equity resolution. We plan to create an internal drafting team and a charter. We will be working with regional and division and office staff and leaders. And then we will be getting feedback from leadership internally through groups like the DMC and the MCC. We also plan to engage with the public, and ideas here include focus groups and a workshop and maybe a comment period. And then finally, we'll be developing a tool so that we can track in an ongoing way how progress is going. Next slide, please. We're hoping to move fairly quickly here in the next month or two to get a drafting team created, and then spend Q3 of this year working on a draft. We may, hopefully, by the end of the year, be able to present a draft to the board for discussion and public comment. And then ideally, within a year, we will bring it back to you for your consideration for possible adoption. And that concludes our presentation. We'd love any feedback.
Really appreciate this. You know, there aren't too many moments when we're really at the start of an effort, the start of a new resolution, to be able to signal to folks that we want their input and ideas early on. And so certainly, as you said, since 2017, the current climate change resolution that the board has gone a little stale. And certainly we've learned a lot since 2017 as we found ourselves here so quickly back into drought and to the consequences of climate change and continued aridification in the state. So I think it's a great moment because we're also not in the teeth of drought to be able to put some thought toward how we as a board continue to support all the climate action that is happening within the state. But importantly, so many of the innovative things that I think are happening globally when we're really thinking of the circular economy, how we continue to look at places like wastewater treatment plants where we have organics diversion happening as places to think a little smarter about our resource management, both on the water side, but has a nexus with energy and all the other discussions that are ongoing. So I just really appreciate the thought and hear just the signal that we're very open and here at the beginning of a process. And I appreciate the modeling of the racial equity resolution because I think that was such a successful effort where, again, we were synthesizing internally our best thoughts around how we might proceed on that challenge. And here, bringing in others, outside voices to help us do our best and have a living document, something that continues to be able to grow with the board's efforts. Yes, action oriented, but importantly, thinking the long term and how best the climate resolution lives in a kind of a family, if you will, of other resolutions, including the racial equity resolution. And I think kind of aligning again our expectations and process around this is just fantastic, and really appreciate the good thought that I know has already been brought into this. And we'll look forward to what I know is going to be a lot more discussion. But there's a lot of different places this resolution can go. There's a lot of work out there. And so I'm really looking forward just to the synthesis opportunity that it provides us all. Looking to fellow board colleagues, Vice Chair.
Well, thank you. This was a good presentation, a good way to kick off the process. And I'm just really excited about this because I think that we can learn from others. We've had, I think, a good start, but I would suggest reaching out to our sister agencies as well, Energy Commission, DWR, Waste Management, Air Board. And, you know, this could, I think, help us to, you know, sort of double down on a lot of the existing programs that we're already doing, but it might open our eyes about ways that we could do things, you know, maybe with a greater focus, a greater focus that could, I mean, I think of the permitting and that we just talked about this morning for superior accomplishments and how those actions and the compliments that the team got today was because they were able to streamline things and move quickly, but there's climate benefits as well. And so I think that it can help us also to better align the resources that we have, you know, just in that example, we're not just doing this to streamline, we're also doing this to be more climate resilient. So thank you. And I look forward to the ongoing discussions.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Board Member McGuire.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I completely agree with the direction here. Generally, it makes absolute sense, and it is exciting to be on the ground floor of something that is so important here. I've been feeling for several years now that the time was right to move forward with updating the climate change resolution. But it really is because it's a testament to all the work that we've accomplished, which is remarkable. It's, you know, you look at a list of actions and it's kind of easy to say, oh, look, you know, we did all these things, but each one carried its own weight, had its own public process, and is a big deal to California and the work that we've accomplished so far. So it's not like we've done a lot, and we'll continue to even while this work proceeds. Vice Chair, your comment about reaching out and coordinating with other state agencies was one I shared as well. And I thought of the Delta Stewardship Council and the work that they've done on climate adaptation as perhaps a good example or someone we should reach out to coordinate with, given our overlapping responsibilities in that area. And yeah, so much does come, take the energy out of the room, if you will, when we're in the drought world, and we're not in that right now. And so I just put in a plug for a lot of the areas that you mentioned as we look at nature-based infrastructure, green infrastructure in our communities, opportunities to increase just the green infrastructure, but also shade, trees to address urban heat island effect, and then sea level rise. And I know a number of our regional boards working with communities along the coast to address those impacts, both the wastewater treatment facilities and other infrastructure and communities. So there's a lot happening, and a lot perhaps that we didn't emphasize as much in the prior update of the resolution that we can look at now. And I very much have an open mind about where this goes and look forward to public input and participation. But again, just thank you for being here and sharing this, and we'll have a chance to dig in here.
Thank you, Board Member. Board Member Firestone.
Great. I'll echo the enthusiasm and thanks. And I think that, as you said, you know, climate change is shaping and part of everything that we do. It's very aligned with our racial equity goals as well, given, as you pointed out, that as climate change impacts really exacerbate the existing inequalities that we're seeing and trying to address with our racial equity resolution. So I just appreciate the vision. Also echo that I like that we're following the the model of our racial equity resolution overall in terms of participation or being participatory. Just as we're thinking about in this early step how we want to go forward, a few things I wanted to mention that I think are just reflections on how we continue to strengthen and learn from each process that we do. One is that when you outline this, so I think staff are on the same page, but just to emphasize, when we did the racial equity resolution, that's a different context, but a lot of what we did was adopt a resolution around principles and direction to develop an action plan. And then an action plan came a year later, and then it was a slower process. And I think we're further along with our climate change work. And I just want to make sure that the action plan is developed in parallel, at least with the resolution, so that we're not waiting a year to develop actions. I know we're all acting. This is ongoing work, but I think just, as I think about resolutions, I like the notion that it needs to be evergreen and living, but I also think we all benefit from concrete plans and deadlines. And so that balance of having both, I think I appreciate that vision that's already there. And then, again, I think this is true. This was a theme throughout our other resolutions, but also with racial equity and our previous resolution. It's just, I really think that tracking and really intentional deliberation, consideration of impacts, both in terms of potential for mitigation of greenhouse gases as well as adaptation, are things that I look forward to seeing how we might incorporate within all of our board decisions, because as other board members already said, really touches every part of our work. And I think there's opportunities to both mitigate greenhouse gases and continue to strengthen our resilience and accelerate adaptation that we need to do, especially for communities that are really on the front lines and already disproportionately impacted. So appreciate that. Just a note, we're close here to doing our considering conservation regs. And I think that is one area where there's really concrete mitigation and greenhouse gas savings that are linked to conservation. And so in addition to what I think we're all dealing with in terms of building resiliency and adaptation, that's one where I think, that we have additional focus of trying to address the water energy nexus and the huge energy use that our water systems require to be able to provide safe and affordable and reliable water to everyone. So appreciate everyone's work. Thank you.
Thank you, board member. Board member Morgan, just checking in to see if you had comment.
Hi, I'll just, also echo everyone's thanks and, the comments that have previously been made by the fellow board members. And just, one of the things that I really do appreciate about the water supply strategy and the other strategies that have come out recently, such as like the salmon strategy, is just really the emphasis on collaborating with our sister agencies. And so just as, we're looking at doing this update, just want to make sure that we're also looking at the cross-media impacts. And so, with climate change, a lot of the things, as we're looking at how our actions and our programs, that we also are taking a look at, the impacts of climate change and those cross-media impacts. And so just as we're moving forward, we're really just continuing to collaborate as we are right now with our sister agencies and continue to do that. So again, just thank you for, bringing this item to us and really looking at just that really collaborative focus as we did on the racial equity resolution and work plan. I really do appreciate it. I'm looking forward to really following this and being involved. Thanks.
Thank you, board member. I agree with everything that's been said here, and it is an opportunity to really create a framework and really center the impacts and the effects of climate change around communities, and then our work tearing off therefrom. So looking forward to the discussion and the work. We do have one commenter, and so would like to call up at this time Jared Voskuil from CASA.
Hi.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Likewise. Good morning, board members. Jared Voskuil on behalf of CASA, the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. CASA represents over 135 wastewater agencies and municipalities that provide the collection of wastewater treatment and resource recovery and recycling of the water. Really appreciative of the dialogue today and of staff bringing this item to initiate the process and providing this informational update. I don't think anyone really needs to look any further than Ed Hawkins' climate spiral graphic demonstrating global trends and the temperature on the planet to know that we really have a changing environment because of this. And I think this opportunity right now to update the board's climate policy is very appreciated, and we look forward to the process going forward. We wanted to, convey our support with the comments for having that interagency dialogue, and we recognize this, with Cal Recycle and organics land diversions resulting in emissions from facilities, and so needing to, have that dialogue with CARB. And in a lot of ways, these dialogues are starting to happen, like these cross-media issues, but having that as a part of the policy, enshrining those relationships, we really are supportive of what you all were also sharing support of. Another item that, just issue for us is wastewater agencies are, nutrient removal, and some of the options for that result in more emissions. In other ways, you can shift it to a different media and it doesn't have that impact, but that's another one of those issues where we want to have that dialogue across agencies. And, it's not just air, there's also an energy demand. And so for a lot of the numeric standards that have been discussed or the levels that are needed for environmental reasons, the level of treatment needed to achieve those is very high intensive. And so there's that issue, grid demand, we should consider that, as well as just the overall impact in balancing, the benefits. And so all that to say, those are unique issues for wastewater agencies, but in our experiences with the state water boards, state revolving fund, stakeholder advisory group, they've kind of divided into types of, similarly situated issues. And then it really helps groups, identify specific matters that are good for them. And so, I think that might be another thing that could be good with regards to the participatory approach. We really like the idea of a participatory approach. And so something like a stakeholder group or having different, types of agencies, involved could be another good benefit or idea for how this goes forward. But ultimately, the outline that was provided, we thought was very good for going forward. So the last thing I wanted to mention was board member Firestone's, just reminder and identification of, being clear what's mitigation and what's adaptation. Both are critical, but I just thought, that's really fundamental for this as well as we're contemplating different strategies. So with that, CAS is very appreciative and lend our support going forward and look forward to participating. And we also have a new director of climate, air, climate and energy, and Sarah Delore will be our representative in these matters for the climate change policy going forward, but she had a conflict and couldn't attend today. So with that, thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Voskuil. Appreciate the participation here, the comments. I agree, and I look forward to what I know will be a lot more discussion. And just your points around ensuring that there's an advisory group and committee, I think definitely open to how we structure, but we'll be very open and communicative to try to synthesize what is just a great opportunity to pull together what is a lot of leadership and thought out there. So thank you, much appreciated. All right, looking to see if there's anything further folks want to mention, and seeing none, just huge thanks for this initial work, and look forward to, again, what will be a lot more here. Actually, we had a somewhat of a schedule there, so I think we're good on when we'll be seeing you next, but maybe here sometime midway between when a draft comes out and as you're starting to meet with folks, might be worthwhile just to kind of elevate what you're all hearing insofar as the resolution development. So just thank you. All right. Much appreciated. Let's go ahead, since we have a little time here in our schedule, take a mid-morning break, give ourselves 10 minutes, and we'll come back and dive right into our hearing on the proposed draft MS4 policy revision. So let's come back here at 10:40 and see you here in a moment. All right, everyone. We're here at 10:40. We can begin to gather ourselves back. Appreciate the break. We're now returning here to item number 5, which is a board hearing on a revised proposed draft policy to standardize cost reporting in municipal stormwater permits. Really appreciate everyone here today. Can kick it off.
Thank you, Chair Esquivel, and thank you, board members, for letting us chat here today. My name is Amanda McGee. I'm the unit manager for the strategy to optimize resource management of stormwater unit and the Division of Water Quality. I have with me here today Mr. Nabil Afrouz, who is the lead water quality control engineer for the project, and also Ms. Catherine Hagan with Office of Chief Counsel. Before we get started, I would like to say that the policy that we're discussing today has been a labor of love for the past few years. It's the result of a lot of hard work and dedication. And I would especially like to thank Mr. Afrouz here for his dedication over the last 2 years to get it completed, as well as our beta test participants, our municipal stormwater permittees, who were really integral in allowing us to understand the unique challenges that stormwater permittees have. And so before I pass it off, I would also like to note that the board is not being asked to make a decision today. The policy has been released for public comment, and we are hoping to return in the fall with a proposal for adoption. So thank you all again for making the time and space for allowing us to be here to present. And thank you to the public present in person and virtually for joining us. And with that, I will pass it off to Mr. Afrouz.
Thank you, Amanda. Good morning, everyone. So in August last year, we released the draft of the municipal stormwater cost policy for the first round of public comments. And in my presentation today, I will mostly focus on the summary of those comments that we received and how we responded to those. I'll also discuss major changes we made in the revised draft policy based on those comments. And before that, I'd like to begin by describing the objectives of the proposed policy and the project timeline. I'll then, the slide before, please. Yeah. And I will then discuss the beta test process and its outcome. I'll conclude by describing the next steps in the project. Next slide, please. So the goal of the proposed municipal stormwater cost policy, its primary goal is to impart better transparency to cost accounting and cost and reporting process for municipal permit implementation expenditure. And we propose doing so by establishing a standardized cost reporting framework for phase 1 and traditional phase 2 MS4 permittees statewide. We believe the standardized annual expenditure information will help the water boards understand the true implementation cost of various permit elements. It would also help the regional boards to estimate the cost of new permit requirements. Next slide, please. So this policy requires 3 things. 1, it establishes statewide cost reporting requirements for phase 1 and traditional phase 2 MS4 permittees. We proposed 11 cost categories for phase 1 MS4 permittees and 5 cost categories for phase 2 MS4. It requires annual reporting of cost data through a data portal that we have developed. And it requires the water boards to incorporate the standardized cost reporting requirements into any future or reissued MS4 permits. Next slide, please. So as you can see in the project timeline in the table, that this project has spanned 6 years, have different important milestones. So please allow me to take some time to explain the approach we followed to get to where we are today. In 2018, the California State Auditor published a report with recommendations for the state water boards to develop a consistent methodology to estimate MS4 permit implementation cost. Based on the audit recommendations in 2021, water boards identified this project as a priority. Storms was charged to develop this policy, And to develop this standardized cost reporting framework, Storms reviewed existing MS4 permits and past annual reports. We reached out several phase 1 MS4 and phase 2 MS4 permittees to understand their existing cost tracking system, how they report costs currently. We also had conversations with the staff from each regional board about the use of the cost data. Based on these discussions, we proposed an initial list of draft cost categories for phase 1 MS4 permittees in 2022. And we held a workshop to gather further feedback from the permittees. Based on the feedback we received during that workshop and some case studies, we revised the initial cost categories. We continued our extensive outreach efforts to municipal permittees, California Stormwater Quality Association, or CASCA, including CASCA subcommittees for stormwater funding, policy and permitting, and phase 2 MS4 subcommittees. We seek feedback from other interested parties, including California Coast Keepers and California Council for Environmental and Economic Balance. All these discussions informed a draft policy that was released last year in August. And we also had a board workshop in September last year. And also we conducted a 6-month beta test of the proposed cost categories and the cost data portal. And we continued our outreach and engagement efforts to disadvantaged communities and the Native American tribes. We incorporated all these feedbacks and from the public comments and the beta test into the revised draft policy that we released last month. And for a second round of public comments. Next slide, please. So here are the participants of the beta test I mentioned, and I would like to take a minute to sincerely thank all the participants of the beta test. The permittees shown here range from small phase 2 cities with a population of a few hundred people to large phase 1 MS4 permittees, including Los Angeles County Flood Control District and the city of San Diego. All the beta testers were extremely helpful and provided critical feedback to ensure the proposed reporting requirements are easy to implement and the data will be useful and usable. Overall, the feedback from the beta test improved the efficacy and the clarity of this proposed policy. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about how did the beta test work. The test participants were requested to report permit implementation costs using the cost reporting framework that we proposed. However, because the beta test was scheduled only for 6 months, permittees had the option to report monthly or quarterly expenditures, or they could choose an annual reporting from a past report. We worked closely with the permittees to make sure all of their questions were answered, and it was clear to them what cost falls under which cost category. At the end of the beta test period, we brought all the participants together to hear about their experiences. Also, we conducted a survey via email to seek written feedback. Discussions with the beta test participants and their feedback greatly informed the development of cost accounting guidance document that we posted on the STORM's website. I'll talk a little more about that later in my presentation. Next slide, please. So here is a summary of the results from the beta test experience survey. As you can see on the left pie chart, that the survey indicates most of the participants agree that the cost categories that we proposed appropriately capture all costs related to permit implementations. However, permittees had concern about the cost subcategories and the cost line items, as you can see on the right pie chart. We also asked permittees about how much time it took for them to submit the cost report following the proposed cost reporting framework. Those estimates varied widely, ranging from 10 hours to several hundred person hours, with a median of 40 hours. However, based on the beta test examples, we anticipate the median time spent on reporting will continue to drop as permittees become more familiar with the reporting system and the cost categories. We also asked permittees about some other aspect of the proposed cost reporting framework, and many of the concerns raised by the beta test participants were also echoed in the public comments, including the ones formally submitted by the beta test participants as public comment letter. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's talk about the public comments that we received. As I mentioned earlier, the first draft of the proposed policy was released on August 17, 2023, for a 45-day public comment period. We received 22 comment letters. 17 were from permittees, 2 from private consultants, 1 from California Coast Keepers, 1 from California Council for Environmental and Economic Balance, and 1 from California Stormwater Quality Association, or CASCA. Many comments we received raised similar issues. Therefore, we divided all the comments into 13 different themes and provided a summary response. Most of the comments focused on the recommendations on how to adjust cost reporting framework. Only one comment opposed the policy, suggesting that all these requirements should be a guidance instead. We released the responses to all these comments as a separate document last month and posted on the STORM's webpage. Please refer to the staff response to public comment document for more details. Next slide, please. In the next few slides, I will go over a few major comments and revisions that we made to the policy in response to those comments. We thought these comments were major because either these were mentioned in multiple comment letters, or the change requested in these comments may have significant effect on the proposed cost reporting framework and change the proposed cost reporting framework. I will discuss these comments under 7 major themes, as I have shown on the slide, and we will go over our response to those comments and what changes were made or we did not make in the document, the revised draft policy. Next slide, please. Theme 1. So many phase 1 MS4 permittees requested that the policy should require only category-specific reporting. The suggestions were to get rid of the cost subcategories or make the subcategories optional. And we heard this from the beta test participants as well as from the public comments. However, we believe subcategories are an essential part of the proposed cost reporting framework because they provide data specific to different permit elements. Considering the challenges faced by the beta test participants in the revised draft policy, we did remove a few subcategories and made adjustment to other cost subcategories. Next slide, please. So this table shows the revisions we made to the subcategories based on the comments received. So for the category 1, it's not very clear from the slide, but from the category 1, we removed asset management and program assessment and subcategories. So the subcategory A and subcategory C were removed. For municipal operations and maintenance, we removed all the subcategories. Category 7 currently do not have any subcategories. For water quality monitoring, category 9, we combined receiving water monitoring and the BMP monitoring. So subcategory A and subcategory C were combined as subcategory A is now called receiving water and water quality monitoring. And for category 10, permit-specific subcategories, we removed all the subcategories. However, we will allow permittees to add subcategories as they report their cost in the data portal based on the details of their permit elements. Next slide, please. Theme 2. The proposed cost reporting framework requires permittees to break down category-specific cost into cost line items. And we heard from the permittees to make those cost line items optional. For some permittees, these line items breakdown would require additional tracking of cost under individual category. And for others, the proposed line items were different from how they currently account for specific types of cost. While we understand permittees' concerns, we believe that breaking down cost into line items help better understand the types of cost under the category. It also offers insight into the cause of year-to-year variations of municipal spending under a certain category. Based on the comments we received and beta test experience, we made a few changes to the proposed line items that we can show on the next slide. So on the left, you can see phase 1 MS4 and what cost line items we proposed. So from the feedback for phase 1 and traditional phase 2 permittees, we combined the overhead cost. As you can see on the left, the cost line items G, and on the right, cost line items F. So we combine overhead costs now with the personnel and overhead cost. So we're kindly telling to account for these two costs together. And for phase 1 permittees, we got rid of the construction cost, which was cost line items F. And for phase 2 on the right, we currently combined materials cost with the equipment cost, so they can track both as one line item. We think that these changes will make the line item specific reporting a lot easier for the permittees. Next slide, please. Theme 3. Throughout the beta testing process and during outreach and in the comment letters, we heard concerns that policy and the staff report do not have detailed enough description for the proposed cost categories and cost line items. Based on these comments, we have developed a separate cost accounting guidance document based on the current policy language. The document is available on the STORM's webpage. It is a standalone living document that we plan to update as needed. The document provides examples of typical activities for each cost category and cost line items. It also provides guidance on how to report funding sources and expenditures reimbursed through a cost recovery program. Next slide, please. Theme 4. Permittees express concerns about certifying a cost report where cost cannot be tracked precisely by hour. There were requests from multiple permittees to explicitly recognize inherent limitations of compiling and interpreting cost data using a standard format. We understand it is not practical to precisely track every dollar spent on permit implementation. And many scenarios require using best professional judgment to provide a reasonably accurate estimates of the cost. And the revised draft policy now have a subsection to address these concerns. The subsection states that the State Water Board recognizes the variability and complexity of municipal accounting for stormwater programs presents a challenge for permittees to track and report permit implementation cost using a standard list of cost categories. As such, many of the costs reported may be estimates based on best professional judgment. Next slide, please. Theme 5. Permittees express concerns about requirements to report the amount of funding from each source that funds their permit implementation program. And comments from them support only a narrative summary of the funding sources, not the amounts. However, comments from the NGOs support requiring to report funding amount from each funding source. And as you know, federal regulations do require phase 1 MS4 permittees to submit a description of funding sources. However, it does not specify if such description must include amount of funding from each source. We believe reporting the distribution of funding to specific sources would inform permittees to explore new funding pathways to fund their stormwater programs. To streamline the process, we provided a broad classifications of various funding sources that permittees may use to report funding received. Next slide, please. Considering there are no federal cost reporting requirements for phase 2 permittees, traditional phase 2 MS4 permittees requested to exclude them from the proposed policy. And we do recognize the resource limitations for the small phase 2 MS4 permittees. However, as the board wants to understand the cost of municipal permit implementation, both for phase 1 and phase 2. We have provided a simplified cost reporting option for phase 2 permittees with fewer categories and no subcategories. Therefore, no changes were proposed in response to these comments. Next slide, please. Many permittees raised concerns about requirements to report some design parameters and location information for structural waste management practices. Similar concerns were raised about requirements to report number of miles swept and the trash recovered under their street sweeping programs. While these are not cost information, such details are essential to interpret cost data collected for structural BMP construction or street sweeping programs. BMP cost information with design specifics will be useful in making cost-effective BMP selection in the future. Similarly, street sweeping program specifics will help understand the nature of street sweeping program for the permittees. Considering these, we propose no revision to the reporting requirements for BMP details and street sweeping program specifics. And this concludes the major comment that we wanted to discuss today. For a complete list of comments and responses, please refer to the staff response to the public comments document posted on the STORM's webpage. Next slide, please. So what's next for this project? We're currently in the middle of our second round of public comments, and based on the comment received, we may revise the proposed cost categories as needed. We plan to come back before the board in fall this year to present this policy for consideration for adoption. I would like to note here that an investigative order 13383 may be issued for an interim reporting period between the policy gets adopted and the water boards incorporate the cost reporting requirements in the new or reissued permit. And if everything goes as planned, the fiscal year 2025-26 potentially could be the first reporting year following the proposed cost reporting framework. Next slide, please. The due date for the public comments on the revised draft policy and the staff report is known June 25, 2024. Comments can be submitted to the email address commentletters@waterboards.ca.gov. Please refer to the public notice posted on the STORM's webpage for information on how to submit comments. Next slide, please. And thanks for attending this hearing. And if you have any questions about the proposed policy or the released documents, please email me or my supervisor, Amanda McGee, or email address on the slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Afrouz and Ms. McGee and Ms. Hagan and the entire team that I know has been working on this. As you said, Ms. McGee, it's been a labor of love, and I know a lot of work has been put into it, and especially really thanking all the participants here in the testing and just helping us better refine what's an important component of having some success here and really understanding the costs that it will are taking in order to comply with this important work and continuing to make stormwater a resource. So just thanks to everyone here. I don't have any questions myself off the bat, but looking to make sure in case any of my fellow board colleagues do. And absent seeing that, we do have several commenters, and so we can start to get to comments here. So the first commenter we have up is Karen Cohen. Can kick us off. And the mic will be cold, so just need to turn the on button there at the base. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, members of the board, Chair Esquivel. My name is Karen Cowen. I'm the Executive Director of the California Stormwater Quality Association. I am going to start with a very heartfelt thank you. So as much of a labor of love that they say they have done, they really have. So for board staff, as well as the stormwater permittees, I think the process has been a good process. And I think that's always important when we're coming to make hard policy decisions. So I know there's been a lot of input from everybody, a lot of really good consideration and discussion. So I really want to start with that. And where we were last year, or was it last year? I guess it was the fall. Yeah, last year. In our first workshop, what you have now, where we are today, is incorporated a lot of that feedback, and I think a lot of the lessons learned, and I'm pretty sure other permittees will have some similar comments. Having said that, when I was thinking about what am I going to say today, I might want to wax philosophical for a tiny little bit. And also remembering you're not making a decision today. So normally our MO is we always come with like, here's a concrete suggestion we have. I think we might still have some things to think about and questions that we're going to want to continue to talk about before I think we get to full recommendation. And that's kind of, I think, a conscious thing because we're, again, wanting to really keep the dialogue going rather than having a recommendation today if we feel like we still want to have some more discussion about it. All right, so hopefully some relatively straightforward comments first. I think around implementation, this is probably, we can address it either in section 7 or 8 of the policy. A no earlier than date for implementation. I think right now it doesn't have a date on it. And the date we'd be looking for is, assuming that this is adopted in the fall, the permittees would start collecting data at the start of their next fiscal year, which would be July 1, 2025 through June 30th, 2026, and reporting that after. So I think that's what Nabil had on the first collection of data, but I think it would be nice to put that in there because how it's not self-implementing. So if something goes out to implement it, so that way folks feel like, okay, we're not going to suddenly have to start collecting and reporting data immediately. The other is that there are some permittees who do have existing requirements for cost reporting. And I think there's some questions on, again, back to timing. Like, so if it's in my existing permit, I'm supposed to do A, and at some point without a gap, I'll have to flip to B. So I think that's just an appeal for maybe some of the permittees to make sure that the regional boards are working directly with state water boards so that that transition period is decreased in its pain to go from like a different set of permitting requirements. Let's see, the next is the guidance document. Very thankful that the guidance document was developed. It did come out just the Friday before Memorial Day. So I have not had a chance to really, in all full honesty, go through it extensively. We've had some folks look at some things. I probably have some things sort of erased today. But because the guidance document, I think for a lot of people says like, what does this mean? What does this mean? What I'm supposed to do? Helps them interpret what the policy is trying to get to. We're going to ask for just a 2-week extension. Hopefully that's not a deal breaker from everybody's vacation plans, but just a 2-week extension so people can have a little bit more time to look at the guidance document to then inform what the policy says. Which also means that we might have some substantive comments when we get to adoption, just again, because I have a couple for you today, perhaps for food for thought in the guidance document, but they might be in the comment letter and or in the, when you come back to consider it for adoption. So related to the guidance document, I think one of the themes was the policy, I think rightfully acknowledges that there's some estimates that might need to be done because of municipal accounting, and we're trying to get the best estimate we possibly can. In the guidance document, there's quite a few instances asking for actuals. That's a little bit of I think we'd ask for the consistency there, recognizing when there's the best professional judgment and the estimates that are being done, that if the guidance document says actuals, I think that's kind of given people a little bit of pause. There was a table that we had requested, I think, in our first comment letter that we'll probably ask for again. And it's just a way to graphically show, you know, Nabil had some of that up there, but then there's also cost categories for each of those items. So it's just really clear to people, like, these are the things that you do for each one of these categories. And perhaps some examples on the subcategories was one of the other recommendations that can't come through as well for the guidance document. Okay, so now I'm going to wax philosophical like I promised. So I was, again, thinking about like, where are we? What are we trying to do with the cost policy? And I think in one level, we have what decisions have we already made? And that's what's in someone's permit. And the data we know that's missing is the cost aspect of the decisions we've already made. The secondary question is, what decisions will we make in the future, right? And that's a whole secondary thing, because the cost data is one part of the data that'll help us make decisions in the future. And I think that frame helps when we're trying to think about what goes in the policy and what doesn't go in the policy, and the different perspectives folks may have about what may or may not go in the policy. And I think it's about actually what decisions will we make in the future? What information do we have to have? And there's a whole bunch of ways that I was thinking about how that really, that plays in. And one example is the BMP data and the street sweeping data. I know that's one of the examples that Nabil brought up. And there's, I think in the response to comments, it talks about informing management decisions, which is a little bit different than informing on the cost side of things. So it starts to get into a little bit of, is this an effectiveness decision? Right? Cost is definitely part of what people think about, but BMPs these are not little standard widgets that go different places. There's a lot of thought that people go into what BMP they are selecting and why. And for sure, cost would be part of that, but there's a lot of other factors that go into it. So I think some people are still struggling with if this policy is the right vehicle for collecting some of that data, rather than is the data good to collect, or is this the right policy? Is this the right vehicle? This is where, again, I apologize, and I don't have an exact recommendation from us at this point. Otherwise, I just want to flag it that this is something I think people are still struggling with. And I think that's why, right? Of what would the data be used for? What decisions are we going to make in the future? And folks feel that there'd be an awful lot beyond cost that they would think about in making a decision about BMP selection or street sweeping frequencies and all that. Let's see, we have some other clarities, I think, in the policy and draft guidance as well. I don't think that this is the venue where we're going to go through what all those different clarities are. We can do that offline with staff. Just wanted to flag it because that'll be part of the comment letter that goes in. All right, so that's the comments from us. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate those comments and agree with you that process is product. And so just appreciate folks being just good participants along for what I know is not uncomplicated discussions and a lot of variability out there in the sector. So just thank you. Appreciate that, Ms. Cohen. Next, I'd like to call up Dagmara Saini, be followed by John Hunter, Sean Bothwell, and then our last commenter will be Lisa Moretti.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and members of the board. My name is Dagmara Saini, and I'm a program manager for the city of Stockton. I'm here today to provide testimony on behalf of the city and as a beta tester for the standardized cost reporting. Thank you for your time today, and I really appreciate everything you do for our environment. The city of Stockton and I welcome the opportunity to provide comments on the draft water quality control policy for standardized cost reporting in our MS4 permits, and acknowledge the modifications that staff already made in the policy from the August 23rd version to the May 24th version, as well as the recent release of the cost accounting guidance document. We agree with the comments that you just heard from Karen, and we want to also request that the comment deadline be extended to allow us time to review and provide comments on the guidance document, which was, like Karen mentioned, just released May 24th, followed by a long weekend, followed by staff hasn't had the opportunity to review that document yet. So it would be much appreciated. Today, just the more significant remaining comments and some suggestions for clarity in our own written comments. Stockton's comments and recommendations are based on a full analysis that we conducted as a beta tester last summer and last fall, which required an in-depth analysis of our accounting systems, our processes, our current functions, and modifications that will definitely be necessary in order to comply with these new requirements. Significant comment on the cost categories and the subcategories. Based on analysis, we believe that we can report on the category level with no problem. However, it should be noted that even the primary categories, this will take a lot of time to track, compile, report on an annual basis, and will definitely result in modifications of our accounting processes and systems. And then we still have serious concerns with the requirement to provide cost subcategories due to our current job coding, our accounting processes that are currently followed, and the range of departments and staff that are involved in the implementation of our stormwater program throughout the city. We are currently unable to separate that on a annual expenditures by subcategories and excuse me, from the proposed draft policy, and ask that we have a couple of requests. One, if you allow the cost reporting for subcategories, we ask that you give us, let's say, a 5-year optional request. So this way, it would allow us to phase into the requirements and allow for State Water Resources Control Board staff to determine how that data will be utilized. And then we also request that you remove the sentence in the response to comments documentation, comment B1. The comment stated, based on the data testing results, reporting costs of these remaining subcategories will require modification, will not require modification of the permittees account systems. I just want to point out that we do not believe that this is a statement of fact and probably should be removed from the statewide cost reporting, because we will need to make some adjustments. Additional data submittal for the treatment of controlled BMPs and for street sweeping. We want to point out that in our October 23rd comment letter, we requested that the additional non-cost reporting data that was required by the draft policy be removed. This modification was not made, and we again ask that the requirement be removed from the draft policy, specifically sections 5.1.3 and 5.3.4. They will require each municipality to submit non-cost reporting data regarding treatment control BMPs and street sweeping. And in order to provide this context for the costs, we require that the city and other municipalities we want to notify you that compiling this data for the city of Stockton and for other municipalities will be, it'll take a lot of efforts. And if the State Water Resources Control Board wants that context for various categories of costs, we request that that they start with the information that we provide in our annual reports instead of requiring new and duplicative information. With that said, Chair Esquivel and members of the board, thank you again for your time to allow me to comment and provide testimony, and once again for everything you do for the environment. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ayeni. I really appreciate those good comments and contributions, and for being a beta tester here amongst all this. The leadership is really appreciated, and just thanks for the good comment and feedback. Just to circle back on your and Ms. Cohen's request, when it comes to an extension of the public comment period, is that something that folks are contemplating at this point? Would it have impact ultimately on the work or the schedule?
Well, in any extension that we put onto the comment period will delay, obviously, the project itself. I just want to note that the guidance document is not, it's intended to be a living document as kind of a companion to the policy. And so that's something that will be constantly changing. It's not part of the package that we're going to be bringing here for adoption. And so it was submitted a little later than the policy and the staff report, and I understand that. But it's not, the guidance document itself is not going to require, a response to comments or any of that. We intend to be updating that kind of constantly as new permits come in, as changes happen to the policy itself, right? This isn't the final policy. And so we intend to update the guidance document as well. So that I just wanted to give a little bit of perspective there.
Really helpful. Thank you, Ms. McGee. Appreciate that. Thank you. All right, let's go to our next commenter, who will be John Hunter, be followed by Sean Bothwell, and then Lisa Moretti.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am John Hunter, and I am the lead consultant for the Lower Los Angeles River Watershed Group. I'm actually speaking in place of Gladys Terrace, who is the chair of the group and was unable to make today's meeting. My comments today have been authorized by the group at their May meeting. And I guess first off, I'd like to say that we do recognize the difficulties that the staff has faced in attempting to develop a uniform reporting strategy that applies effectively to the large and small and urban and rural communities of California. And overall, we think that the staff has done a commendable job in that endeavor. That said, I would like to make a few comments. And I guess first I'd like to say that following up on the comment that was made earlier today, that the average time it would take to prepare this report would be 40 hours. That was the median average. And let's just keep this in perspective. That's 40 hours times just the 9 members that make up our watershed group. That's almost 500 hours. That is a staff person that working for a quarter of a year on this. So 40 hours, oh, that doesn't sound like much, but in reality, that is quite a bit of work to do these reports. We're already reporting fiscal data to the regional board, and we really don't want to add another layer of reporting to this. So we would ask that any new reporting, additional reporting, be incorporated into the MS4 permit reporting, so that we only have to do this once a year. And specific items that I have, item 5.1.3 of the revised draft policy mentions that permittees need to track and report construction cost of BMPs. And it's not clear to me if that includes private development. We have a lot of private structural BMPs that are going in. And we really, as municipal agencies, don't have any idea what the cost is of those to private entities. So that really is going to be difficult to develop. Public costs, not a problem. We've got that, but for private, it's going to be tough. For section or item 5.3.4, which deals with street sweeping, it mentions that you want the data in volume. That's really tough to come up with. I mean, sometimes in the fall, you're talking about leaves. Other times you're talking about sand and grit that comes from curbs. So weight, we're already collecting it by weight. Volume really would just be an estimate and of limited value. And also, you ask what area will be swept. We're concerned about how much detail you want in that. The easy answer for us is simply, well, we sweep the entire city. And that would be, so we'll just give you the square miles of the city. So, how we do this is going to be difficult. And we think we need some clarification on that. And then finally, I know it was addressed earlier, reporting the sources of the funding. As long as we can keep that big picture and don't have to get into detail, I think we're fine with that. We don't really see what the relevance is to reporting the sources of funding. I mean, either we have enough to support the program or we don't. Where the money comes from, we just don't see the need to report that data. So that concludes my statements. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The Watershed Group does plan on submitting more detailed comments in the written when we submit our written comments. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you as well, Mr. Hunter. I really appreciate those comments. And as you mentioned, street sweepers and sort of their, how much are they kind of covering of the city, et cetera. Just out of curiosity, wondering, are there GPS trackers on those street sweepers? And just, because my mind, does go to, okay, what are low cost ways of developing that data? But just wondering.
We do have swept miles. So in other words, if a sweeper goes up the street and then down the streets, we can calculate that by curb miles that are swept. I honestly don't know if the street sweepers are supplied with GPS. That's a good question. You've got me curious now. I'm going to have to find out myself.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Hunter, again for the comments and contributions here.
Thank you.
Okay, next I'd like to go to Sean Bothwell and be followed by Lisa Moretti.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. My name is Sean Bothwell. I'm the Executive Director for California Coastkeeper Alliance. I'm also here on behalf of Los Angeles Waterkeeper today. I'll start by saying that we continue to be generally supportive of this project, and we commend your staff for striking a good balance between getting the necessary data to make informed future permit decisions, while also balancing not requiring onerous reporting requirements for the permittees. I do want to say at the outset that this policy needs to require line item and individual BMP costs. Otherwise, this policy is not going to provide the data necessary to improve permits in the future, which I know the methodology is an important part, but for us, improving permits, focusing more on water quality is a really big kind of second step that we want to see, and we need the data in order to make those informed decisions. That said, I want to flag 3 concerns we have today. And we will provide specific policy language recommendations in our written comments. First, I want to start with section 4.4, which last time we met was something we flagged as something very important to us, but also something we agreed with the language because we felt like staff struck a really good balance between what NGOs wanted and what the permittees wanted. Previously, section 4.4 stated that 1, the lack of resources spent on compliance will not be used as a surrogate for non-compliance, something the permittees wanted to shield themselves. And then the second provision in 4.4 used to state that resources necessary to comply shall not be used to justify non-compliance or as a rationale for less stringent permit terms. That's something we wanted to prevent overinflated data from being used to justify weaker permits. The latter provision, the one CCKA needs to be comfortable with this policy overall, has been removed, while the provision preventing the public from using this data to argue why non-compliance is occurring remains intact. So something that started as a balanced statement has now been tipped in the favor of permittees, and we strongly urge the State Water Board to retain the original balanced language. The second concern we have is section 6.1. Last time we met, CCK and LA Waterkeeper were concerned that permittees would inflate their cost of compliance by adding costs that are unnecessary for permit implementation. Lobbying is a good example of our concern. We seem to notice that permittees and their consultants have a ton of time and resources available to lobby the water boards and the legislature for less stringent permit terms, yet they claim lack of funding to actually build BMPs and improve water quality. We requested that permittees not be allowed to report costs that aren't directly associated with permit implementation. The revised policy now allows for unnecessary costs to be reported, stuff like lobbying. And we're actually okay with the permittees voluntarily reporting unnecessary costs, but those miscellaneous costs must be reported completely separate from the required reporting costs. Section 6.1 now allows permittees to report those unnecessary costs, but states that the mandatory reporting requirements still need to be there. But 6.1 does not explicitly state that those unnecessary costs need to be reported completely separate from the costs associated with direct permit implementation. And so blending those two costs shall not be allowed. And that's what we request, an explicit statement that blending those two things, unnecessary permit costs and mandatory reporting costs, need to be reported separately. Lastly, we strongly support section 8.4, which states that reporting data will be made publicly available, something we've been told is the intent of this policy from the very beginning. But given previous debates over stormwater permit costs, construction general permit comes to mind, we know that permittees tend to over-exaggerate costs or will include costs that are not appropriate because they're not directly related to permit implementation. With the revised policy, permittees are now allowed to estimate their costs using best professional judgment. That's fine. This is a good example of your staff making the policy less burdensome on permittees. But if best professional judgment is going to be allowed, then their justification for those costs need to be made publicly available. Currently, the revised policy only allows the state and regional boards to request the documentation justifying best professional judgment estimates. The board should ensure that the public has equal access to those cost justifications to provide accountability and prevent overestimating. This is particularly important if the board is going to allow permittees to use their self-reported self-estimated compliance costs to argue for less stringent permit terms, as was my concern when discussing 4.4 earlier. If reporting the justification is too burdensome, fine. Then the policy should at least allow the public to request those documents, just like the water boards can do. To conclude, overall, we again generally feel that staff has struck a healthy balance here, but section 4.4 needs to be addressed, and there needs to be a few more small tweaks to be made in order to provide accountability when reporting compliance costs. We really look forward to this data being reported and used to help improve future stormwater permitting so that permittees can focus on improving water quality rather than unnecessary paper pushing. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well, Mr. Bothwell. Appreciate those good contributions here, continued contributions to this discussion and work, and just really appreciate it. Thank you. Next and last commenter here, I'd like to call up Lisa Moretti.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Lisa Moretti, and I am the supervising engineer for the City of Sacramento Stormwater Program. I'm here representing the Sacramento Stormwater Quality Partnership today. It's a group of MS4s that includes the Sacramento County and 7 MS4 communities. I truly want to thank the Water Board staff for their work on this policy. Although the new policy will still require the City of Sacramento to update our processes, our accounting processes, to be able to comply, and it will be a significant workload to update our standards, how staff report time, how consultants invoice the city, and work with our fiscal department. We truly appreciate the reduction in the subcategories, which will reduce that workload. I believe that policies can be improved when there's a genuine participatory approach and feedback process. And I just want to really thank Water Board staff in taking the time. I know 6 years sounds probably forever from an audit to implementation, but to hear, I think, both from CASCA and NGOs say that staff struck a balanced approach, I sincerely want to reiterate that. It is not often that we can have frank discussions about what is potential unintended impacts of wording and being able to have a joint discussion on what are the outcomes we want and how data will be used. I often debate with my consultant, more data is better, more data is more costly, so let's collect data that will give us effective outcomes. And I continue to want to work on this, and I appreciate that this will become a living guidance document. And that is the bulk of my comments, is that I would like to understand the process for having that living guidance document. I think we've all been in process where there's a goal, but after 6 years, they may want to move on a little bit. So I just like to understand what that process will be, because as I know, and as City of Stockton and other permittees have implemented this, there are areas where we can do it quickly and areas which may take more time. So I reiterate City of Stockton's comments to allow a rollout process, and that will be incredibly helpful. And I think that will also address the NGO's concerns of overinflation of cost. If there's vague guidelines, then we tend to put everything in the kitchen sink. The more specific the guidelines, I think you'll have less of an issue with overinflation of costs. If you tell me all O&M costs, well, yeah, my O&M guys, they work hard. I want to take every little bit of credit for their work. But am I going to maintain the drainage system whether I not have an MS4 permit or not? Absolutely, they still need to address flooding. So I think that the more specific, we might be able to even get closer to the balance of not overinflation of costs. So I just like to end with understanding that although this is going to be a significant workload, and I hope we can streamline the approach, I want to truly thank and say that this has been an example of a really good working process that allowed time for genuine feedback, rather than just putting something out and moving forward fast. Even though it did take long, I think it will have an end result where hopefully the data will be useful in the end. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for yours. Really appreciate those comments and acknowledgement, and agree that, again, process is product, and it may take time, but looking into the out years, it'll ultimately save time as well and make something more actual effective. So I appreciate the eye on effectiveness, and again, just the acknowledgement of the work that can be done when you have the space to listen and to be reflective and to all collectively come to as best of a space as we can on this work. So just thank you for that incredibly. And Ms. McGee, maybe it might be worth following up a little on what does process look like kind of moving forward. Again, a lot of work has been put in, but as further implementation unfolds on this, what is a thought on the ability to kind of course correct or make adjustment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I appreciate the comment about having a kind of a process for that guidance document and how that's going to be updated. That's something that we haven't discussed, but we certainly will over the next couple of weeks and come up with a plan for that for implementation. And then as far as I guess the long-term implementation, we haven't yet, we don't know where this program is going to live, to be perfectly honest. So that's something that we're working on internally, and we will have a plan for that, but who we're going to hand it off to is still kind of up in the air, I think.
We'll see who gets to be fortunate.
Exactly.
And I appreciate that, and just thank you. And I know, the thoughtfulness around just how that lives will extend, I'm sure, to just the rollout, and because I know we heard that a bit in just those with existing reporting requirements, or how to kind of phase in for folks, or importantly, just have clarity as to the expectations and how folks transition over. So just thank you for all of that. And again, thank you for the commenters, participants in the beta test, and the incredible work. And, we hear over and over again here just the well-deserved praise on the approach and what it means for the product in the end. So thank you. Fellow board colleagues, any questions or comments here? Further, Board Member McGuire.
Yes, thank you for your ongoing work on this. I'm interested to see it across the finish line and start to see some of the results. I think it's important to have better consistency statewide in terms of reporting on stormwater program implementation, but it's tricky, right? It's difficult because we have so many different permittees around the state of different sizes and shapes, and institutional administrative frameworks and funding sources and permits, right? They're not uniform. It's not a monolith, and so I just want to emphasize ongoing concerns I have, as the intent here is to use it to help inform management decisions. It's also going to be we have to be very cautious about comparing it amongst permittee to permittee, because it is in some respects apples and oranges. I think about for example, the trash provisions. We've talked a lot about street sweeping here. And so the trash provisions haven't been fully implemented statewide. We have a number of regional boards that have yet to incorporate those requirements into their permits. It's not currently in the phase 2 MS4 permit. And yet we're asking questions about cost of compliance, about an activity that's closely related to trash mitigation. And I don't know the details about what's in the permits now and what's not, but to me, that's just an example to say that it's going to be tricky to understand exactly what we're seeing. And I appreciate the questions that get into a little bit more specifics, like the structural BMPs. You're asking for some details, but again, we just need to be very mindful of how this information is going to be used in the longer run. So just a flag, and I'll probably mention that again as we get closer to adoption. But the area that I also flagged that I'm interested, if you have any feedback about that transition period. So for those, and if you don't have it today, that's fine to follow up. But for those MS4 permittees that already report on costs, have you envisioned, or does the policy cover that scenario and how that transition process would work? Or would they report twice?
We certainly don't want them to report twice. And so our intention is to, when we develop the investigative order as that kind of stopgap measure, as we discussed, before it's rolled into the permits themselves, we will be working with the regional boards very closely to make sure that they're not either requiring another form of reporting when it comes to cost. And if we can somehow work with them to have just one reporting requirement for each permittee, because we don't need two sets of data. That's
Agreed, and appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I talk to your first point though, too? And I think I just lost my train of thought, but it goes to the permits being very different, right? And understanding the cost data as it's coming in. And I just want to also emphasize that we understand that we're not going to take all this data in and just make decisions based on numbers. And so it's going to take a lot of understanding of what those different permits actually require. And like you said, the phase 2 permit is very different than these phase 1 permits, and there's different requirements in each of them. And so while we can hopefully get a statewide kind of view of what different permit elements cost, we will have to think about, what goes into each of those for each specific region, any specific permit. And so that's something that on our end, we definitely intend to do. So
yeah, I appreciate that. And I have no problem with street sweeping generally, but since it was brought up a number of times, just some of the comments we heard today, right? At saying, well, should it be reported by weight, or should it be reported by volume, or should it be tracked and reported by square miles or miles of streets swept? Or I don't know the answers to that, and nor do I know how the regional boards have looked at it, nor your state board level programs. So those are all, I think, valid questions and issues and concerns, because this information will be used in some form to inform future decisions and understand how these difficult resource balancing decisions are made by permittees, who we know in the stormwater world are very much constrained with their ability to fund their programs to the level I know that they would like to. That this is an ongoing challenge. It's not going to change overnight. So anyway, but thank you for continuing to think through this.
Thank you, board member. Agree and appreciate all those points. Vice Chair.
Well, just big picture. Thank you for the discussion and all of the commenters and the dialogue here. I'm just, this has taken a long time, but I think these are all really good questions, because we need to get better at this. This just isn't our area of expertise. And those that are collecting the information, I understand completely the resistance to sharing, but this is going to help them in the long run, because I think that it's going to enable us to make better decisions that are more better informed. And the process isn't just to get those apples and oranges closer to apples, but to tease out when it really is an orange versus an apple. And then we can evaluate that, as we make our decisions where, we have additional information on cost, but it's not perfect. And here's where there are gaps. And as far as where it's going to live long term, I hope that this is something that can live throughout our regulatory programs, because these issues come up frequently, and we're just not in a position to really be able to decide when it's sort of he said, she said, and this at least gets us to a place where we can be more disciplined. So thank you. Look forward to the comments, and I'd be in favor of an extension of time, because I just think that giving the opportunity to all the stakeholders to read through the guidance document that was released and be able to provide more meaningful comment would be helpful. Thank you.
Can I
Vice
just
Chair.
make a
Yes.
comment on that?
Ms. Holmes, please.
I agree. I think to the degree that the guidance document will inform the comments on the policy, that it's important to include those. We'll get better feedback, be able to respond and have more information for the board when we come back to you with the response to comments. So I would support a 2-week extension on the comment period.
Great, appreciate that, and I agree and am supportive as well. And to your point, Vice Chair, this discussion is a bit of a model. The amount of time taken, less part of the model that we have, and I agree that I think it can help to even inform other programs in the way that we pursue this. It is hard when we're having policy debates here at the dais to have just such conflicting versions of reality, basically. And so the more that we can, help create that common understanding of the cost and impacts of the policy decisions here, the better we can get to the actual heart of the policy discussion. So thank you, Vice Chair. Board Member Morgan or Board Member Firestone, just to see, checking in. Okay. All right. Well, this isn't a decision point, and so just really appreciate the discussion and the responsiveness here, and look forward to that future moment here coming up in the fall. And then otherwise, just anything, Ms. McGee, that you wanted to reflect on further?
No, just I guess I will +1 all of the comments that were made about just how the collaboration has really helped this policy evolve and be successful. And I appreciate all the constructive criticism that we've gotten over the past couple of years. It's been a fun process, to be honest, and I hope to kind of continue this moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Agree. All right. Well, that wraps up item number 5 here. Again, appreciate everyone's contribution to the discussion and look forward to further discussion on. And it's sliding us here to the end of our meeting. We have 2 items left. First is board member reports. Looking to see if anyone would like to volunteer to go first. And then otherwise, I can quickly chime in here. So last week, where am I? Yes, last week. I was at the American Conference Institute's PFAS summit that was held in New York, joined a number of other state colleagues, New Jersey, Minnesota, Washington, Maine, talking about our work on PFAS. It was held at the New York Bar, a number of lawyers there, litigants and otherwise, all interested to hear the latest that the states are tackling, and certainly the feds as well. Given the new maximum contaminant level that was announced on 2 PFAS substances, PFOS and PFOA. So it was just a great opportunity to be able to share what we're doing here in the state, but importantly, learn as well and listen to our other state colleagues, many from back east, as we know, where manufacturing of PFAS occurred. And so their challenge is an order of magnitude, sometimes more challenging than ours, but we're still all here in the same boat, being recipients of so much of those chemicals here. So was again a good opportunity, fortunate to be able to head out there and engage. The other thing I was going to flag is just yesterday, actually, I spoke at the BizFed advocacy conference that was held here in Sacramento, bringing together BizFed Los Angeles and BizFed Central Valley. It's good to participate in a small roundtable of business leaders talking about the work that the board is doing and fielding questions. Sometimes I wouldn't go say misinformation, but certainly some hot takes that always are better with a little more dialogue and engagement around where we are with things like the water supply strategy or work before the board. So it was a great opportunity to engage and appreciated it. And that wraps up my board member reports for now.
I have nothing to report.
Thank you.
I have nothing to report.
No report.
And I also do not have a report.
All right. Well, thank you. That makes board member reports very quick today and brings us to item number 7, our executive director's report. Anything, Executive Director Oppenheimer, you would like to report?
Nothing to highlight or point out in the report, but of course, take questions or suggestions.
Looking to see if any board members have any thoughts or feedback on the board executive director's report. Seeing none, that wraps up item number 7. And since we don't have closed session today, it actually brings us to the end of our meeting completely here. This meeting is now adjourned. Our next meeting will take place June 18th. I appreciate everyone's time this morning. Board meeting ending before noon. We'll take it. So thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you.